Hello, I'm Siân Moxon. I'm here with my colleague Dr. Justin Webb. We're both from London Metropolitan University, and we're going to be talking about Wild Ways, a scoping study on influencing pro-environmental behaviours to facilitate urban rewilding. Now, there is a trend towards urbanisation. 55% of the world's population are currently estimated to live in an urban area, with this projected to increase to 68% by 2050. London, pictured here, is the fourth most populous city in Europe, with 9 million inhabitants, and the 27th most populous city in the world. In July 2019, the National Park City Foundation declared London as the world's first national park city, with the goal to make the capital greener, healthier and wilder. This echoes the global United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which aims to make cities more resilient and sustainable. And we can see from this map of London's green space that London already has a significant amount of green open space. We can see in this breakdown of London green space cover that private gardens contribute significantly to the amount of green space. And you can see those areas circled in pink here. There are an estimated 3.8 million garden plots, front and back gardens, in Greater London, and private gardens make up around a quarter of the capital, and about 14% of it is made up of private garden green space, the rest being unvegetated. Unfortunately, the amount of green space in London's residential gardens is decreasing. In a 2010 report, the Wildlife Trust reported a 12% loss in vegetated garden cover in London over a 10-year period. And you can see from this graph the results of the study, which showed that trees, vegetation and lawns were being replaced by hard surfaces, buildings and so on. This resulted in a loss of wildlife habitat, affecting diverse wildlife such as birds, mammals, amphibia and invertebrates. Notable species at risk include hedgehogs, which are declining rapidly, the house sparrow, the common frog and the stag beetle, an iconic species. This loss of urban wildlife comes at a time of biodiversity crisis. The latest State of Nature report for the UK studied 9,670 species and concluded that nature is in trouble. 41% of UK species are in strong or moderate decline, with 15% extinct or threatened with extinction. Therefore, there's an urgent need to rewild cities to help mitigate this alarming biodiversity decline. So to explore urban rewilding, we first needed to define it. And for the purposes of this study, rewilding is defined as making places wilder again by bringing back greater diversity of life, a phrase coined by Jorgensen, and that's interpreted for an urban context as incorporating native plants and animals into urban infrastructure as defined by Mills, and as shown in this concept graphic. London's residential gardens offer an opportunity to increase biodiversity by making small adaptations to turn them into a habitat for wildlife. Altering these spaces to accommodate nature could significantly contribute to London fulfilling its aims as a national park city. This is explored through the drawing shown here, which was Rewild My Street's winning entry to the Imagine London as a National Park City Design Ideas competition. The Rewild My Street campaign has developed from the competition entry. It explores how a typical London residential street can be adapted to improve biodiversity, giving information on species and habitats people can attract, and products and activities to create wildlife features. I founded the Rewild My Street project, and it inspired this research in collaboration with Justin to use the project as a test case to develop an intervention strategy to foster behaviour change. The Rewild My Street website includes designs based on the Victorian terrace street typology found in many London boroughs, which is used to represent a typical residential street. Architectural drawings shown here are developed at different scales and projections to show how a notional street adapted for biodiversity could look, providing ideas for how to successfully integrate wildlife measures into existing properties. In addition to these vision drawings showing the overall street, pattern drawings shown here show design considerations for implementing individual features, such as a wildlife gap to allow species such as hedgehogs to roam across garden boundaries. Subscribers to the website receive a wild makeover guide and monthly seasonal wild makeover tips, such as this latest one advocating No Mow May. The Rewild My Street website therefore provides a basis upon which an intervention strategy could be developed, with changes made to the website itself, coupled with the development of supporting interventions to influence individual behaviour in regard to the rewilding of urban private gardens. And now Justin is going to tell us more about behaviour change.
So how do we change behaviour? So first we need to understand what is behaviour. It's the way a person behaves in a particular situation. Observable actions, emotions, thoughts, feelings and other mental processes are not behaviours, but they can influence behaviour. Changing behaviour is a challenging and complex process requiring theories, methods and evidence from many disciplines. We are all a bundle of associations between past events, thoughts, emotions and other behaviours that can drive a particular behaviour in opposition to our goals, intentions and plans. We're creatures of habit, routines, of desires, urges and impulses. Put simply, changing behaviour is hard. Firstly, we need an understanding of the behaviours or behaviour that we're trying to change, so we can target the influences on that behaviour and develop intervention approaches and intervention strategies accordingly. Secondly, we need a systematic approach to developing interventions where all options are considered with explicit rationale for selecting intervention content. Many frameworks exist upon which behaviour change interventions can be based. However, it's not clear which is the most comprehensive and conceptually coherent. The Behaviour Change wheel aims to overcome this problem by synthesising 19 behaviour change frameworks, with a behavioural model sitting at its centre. The Behaviour Change wheel has the combi model sitting at its centre, the behavioural model, And the COMBI model postulates that behaviour comes from an interaction between one's capability to perform a behaviour, the opportunity to perform a behaviour, and the motivation to carry out that behaviour. The Behaviour Change Wheel provides an evidence-based, stepped approach to changing behaviours, encouraging intervention designers to consider a full range of options, choosing only those that are the most promising. So let's take a quick look at the COMBI components. So the physical capability, the strength, skill or stamina to perform a behaviour. The psychological capability, the knowledge, mental strength, mental skill or mental stamina. The physical opportunity, time, location, resources and availability. The social opportunity, cultural norms and social cues. Then there's reflective motivation, so the plans and evaluations, the conscious decisions to perform behaviours. But there's also automatic motivations, our impulses, our automatic decisions, our habits, our inhibitions. When trying to change behaviour, it's important to use these COMBI components to understand that behaviour, to help understand where we might need to make a change to influence behaviour in a particular way. At the hub of the behaviour change wheel is the COMBI model. Surrounding the COMBI model is a layer of 9 intervention functions that intervention designers can choose from. And it's these functions that bring about the change depending on what is understood about the behaviour targeted for change. Are we trying to bring about a change in social opportunity, for example, or reflective motivation? Or maybe we're trying to change all 6 COMBI components. So the intervention functions that intervention designers can choose from are education, persuasion, incentivization, coercion, training to develop skills, enablement, modelling, environmental restructuring, or restrictions. The final layer of the behaviour change wheel is that of the policy categories, the approaches that can support the delivery of the identified intervention functions, which are selected based on the identified changes to the COMBI components. So intervention developers can review the intervention functions selected and then decide on the policy categories that can support their delivery. There are 7 to choose from, being environmental or social planning, communications and marketing approach, changing legislation, delivering a service, increasing regulation, establishing rules or principles of behavioural practice, maybe using fiscal measures or providing guidelines. At the time of recording this presentation, we're conducting a scoping review of the existing literature on intent-orientated pro-environmental behaviours with a focus on urban rewilding. The scoping review will investigate pro-environmental behaviours in relation to changes to private gardens, A synthesis of the existing literature is an important first step in understanding and influencing behaviour. A scoping review approach has been selected as this is an emerging research field with heterogeneity in research questions, variables and approaches. So this scoping review will map the body of literature in the area of conscious pro-environmental behaviour change specific to urban rewilding in a user-friendly format. You can see the search string on your screen. We're conducting 2 different searches. You'll see the first one there on pro-environmental behaviours and cities or towns and behaviour, and the second one specifically focused on biodiversity and gardening or gardening for wildlife. We'll be searching databases and search engines such as Bio1, EBSCOhost, science.gov, PubMed, and Google Scholar. The identified papers are currently being screened for inclusion in the scoping review, and they're being screened in 2 broad areas. Firstly, those that aim to explain and understand urban rewilding behaviour, thinking about those COM-B components, and secondly, those that aim to influence urban rewilding behaviour, thinking about the intervention functions and policy categories. Now, we acknowledge that some of the identified papers might fall into both of those categories, and we'll be using the behaviour change wheel as a coding framework. So the scoping review is well underway. Following that, mixed methods research, including interviews and a quantitative survey, will take place to help confirm our understanding of the capability, opportunity and motivational factors influencing urban rewilding behaviour. So the scoping review will identify what's already known about this particular behaviour, but to ensure an accurate understanding of the influences, we will conduct a series of semi-structured phone interviews selected because of the dispersed nature of participants across London, the focus of the Rewild My Street website. We'll be recruiting 15 participants to take part in those semi-structured interviews. The questions, the topic guide will be based on the findings from the scoping review, and the interviews will be recorded and transcribed and then analysed, again using the COM-B model and behaviour change wheel as a coding framework. Assessing the relative importance of the determinants of urban rewilding behaviour is necessary to confirm action areas. This will be achieved through the use of a quantitative survey. So an overarching question for this survey will be, for me to partake in rewilding behaviour such as making changes to my garden, I would. And then the statements will be organised by capability, opportunity and motivational factors based on the earlier stages of this research. Agreement to each statement will be measured on a Likert scale of 1 to strongly disagree, up to 7 of strongly agree. We'll be aiming for completion by a larger sample as possible, and we will be creating correlation coefficients to calculate the strength of the associations of the determinants to urban rewilding behaviour. Effective behaviour change interventions make use of theory-based approaches, and as mentioned, we are using the COM-B model and the behaviour change wheel as the conceptual framework within this research. The final part of the research will be to convene an intervention development group with key stakeholders, and through a series of workshops to develop an intervention strategy based on what we believe is changeable and what we think will have the biggest impact, using those stages of the behaviour change wheel, particularly the intervention functions and policy categories linked to the identified COM-B components. So the intervention development group will identify the intervention functions and policy categories, and then specific behaviour change techniques using the Rewild My Street as the basis for an intervention strategy. The resulting intervention strategy will be tested and evaluated going forwards from this research to see the impact that it has on urban rewilding behaviour. The study protocol has been published the title and web address are available to you here on screen. For more information on Rewild My Street, then the web address is rewildmystreet.org, or you can get updates on Twitter at rewildmystreet. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. If you would like more information, then you can contact either Siân or I. Our email addresses are s.moxon@londonmet.ac.uk or j.webb1@londonmet.ac.uk.